Welcome to episode 6. Whoops, need a second hand of Poetry Workshops. We have two guests today. We have Carl Scott and Marvin Lewis Dorsey. And Carl's going to go first so she can say something introductory while I bring up her poems. Go ahead, Carl.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carl Scott. My pronouns are she or they. I currently live in Los Angeles, and I in the Boyle Heights area. I immigrated here to the U.S. when I was 8 from Poland. My dad is from Bangladesh. My mom is from Poland, and a lot of my writing kind of deals with my identity, as well as mental health and and I've been writing for the last, I've been focusing on poetry and like the craft of poetry for like the last 3, almost 4 years. But I actually started writing when I was pretty young, when I was about 7 or 8. I took a break for a few decades, just wasn't encouraged to write, but now I'm back at it and I love it. And I recently, a year ago, I published my first chapbook called Gathering Grandmother's Bones. And that's available on my website at caroscott.com. And I'm gonna get into my first poem. There's the book. Donna is showing it. It's my book's anniversary, actually, first year anniversary. So I'm pretty excited for that. And so this first poem that I'm gonna read is from my book. It's called Grandma's Hands. And I feel like it's, I don't know, it's probably my favorite poem out of the book. And I wrote it after I decided to take an ancestry or a DNA test from ancestry.com, just because I don't have any direct, I don't have a direct link to I actually don't know my dad. So I don't have a link to his family, and I'm not very close to the Polish side of my family either. So this kind of felt like a way to just kind of find out where my ancestors were from, because I feel like a connection with the ancestors is really important. And I really do encourage everyone to, write letters, talk to your ancestors, because they definitely live in our blood and our DNA. So I'm going to get into this first poem, Grandma's Hands. For the first 12 years of my life, my mom said, "You're 75% Polish, 25% Indian." Who was I to not believe her? But she lied, manipulated the numbers in her desire for me to be white, announcing, "You were raised in Poland," as if this changed my genetic fragments. Today, I seek another version of the truth. Order a DNA test on sale, 30% off. I want scientific percentages. I want to know who painted the hieroglyphics in my veins. Was I switched at birth? Did my mom pick a man's name at random? Will they send me Grandma's gentle hands through the mail? My father says to be Bengali, you must speak the language. I am not Bengali. I am not American or Polish. I wish I was 100% intentional. Instead, I am 48% South Asian, 48% Eastern European, and 4% Indus Valley. 100% obscure, no links to Ancestry.com's genetic communities. They deny me a family too, give me distant European cousins. I don't claim national border identities. A river flows from a plateau, spills into a sea, connects to an ocean, trembles at my LA river's edge. I touch the water, I feel a pull. Maybe I'm reaching, but I can hear my ancestors speaking. My dripping fingers weave gnarled amino acids, revealing an ancient script. I was not intentional, yet I'm here, digging for sweet, muddy acceptance, following my tangled roots. In India, archaeologists uncover a rocky Gari burial site, siphoning DNA from a 4,000-year-old ear bone, proving we South Asians descend from her Indus magic. Grandma's gentle hands don't arrive in the mail, but she's listening, as am I. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, This is the second time I read it, and I saw something different this time than the first time. So I'm going to point that out first. No capitalization. Any theory behind that?
Yeah, I think that, I think that for me, at least personally, and I think there's like different other theories about this, but for me personally, I just, I try to be anti-hierarchical. Like I don't believe that we should value one person or thing or, identity over another. And I think the same thing with language. For me, when you would capitalize something, you sort of like uplift it to a certain like other, to like a higher level. So we capitalize like pronouns and whatever. And so I kind of wanted to get rid of that in my poetry. And I actually, I've been, and I think I've been changing it around a little bit. I initially, this poem was capitalized, and then the I wasn't capitalized. And then when I sent you this version, I actually changed it and I capitalized the I, and then I took everything, then I put everything else in lowercase. And I think, as my growth as a poet, and my journey as a person, has gone forth, I feel like I guess I've been reclaiming more of my identity and who I am. And so I guess that's kind of how I felt. So I did want to uplift myself a little bit in this poem.
That was going to be my second question. The capitalization of the I's, but you handled it very well. Your answer is a good answer. If you have a reason for doing things, you're justified. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that grammar, I think the beauty of like poetry versus like other types of writing is that you're able to sort of like really play around with like grammar and punctuation and all of that. Like you can kind of like, you can make it your own, which is what really draws me to poetry, is that you don't have to follow anybody else's rules. You can follow your own and you can make up your own. And then, yeah, as you said, Don, like, as long as there's just like a justification for it. And that's something that I think, you can figure out as a writer and as a person.
That's very interesting. That's something you have in common with our other poet today, Marvin Lewis Dorsey. We'll talk about that later, of course, when we get to his poetry, but you'll see a parallel there. I didn't notice that before. But of course, what I noticed before was some of these lines are just phenomenal. I have to point them out. I would like to think anybody that reads these poems is going to notice that in the fourth stanza, I want to know who painted the hieroglyphics in my veins. It's just phenomenal, phenomenal. And then it continues that fifth stanza, will they send me grandma's gentle hands through the mail? That's very witty. That is just, it works on all levels, right? It's an amazing image and it's a great thought. Just, this is what poetry can do. Yeah. I was interested in the languages and the places, of course, because I've seen different spellings, different pronunciations, and I was just curious. So you satisfied some of my curiosity there. I remember the one that was where I was clueless was a place. That was a Rakigari, right? So that's a burial site. That's the name of the burial site. So
yeah, it's part of this. It's an ancient civilization that was that existed. I think it was like 5,000 years ago. And that's the reference to the Indus Valley as well, because that was what the whole civilization was called, and it's in between where like modern day India and Pakistan are. And they were like, it's like when they uncovered a lot of these smaller towns within the larger civilization, the towns had a lot of like a lot of technology. Like they had running water, they had public baths, and so it's just like amazing to think of what our ancestors were doing like 5,000 years ago, and we think that like we're advanced now, but I think they had a lot of they had a lot of technology as well. They had a language, and this is one of the few ancient languages that hasn't actually been translated. They haven't been able to figure out what it means, but they did have, they have writing, and they were mostly an egalitarian society from what they found from the artifacts. Just by the housing, there wasn't like a royal palace or something. Like the housing was more like everyone had the same type of house.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And so, yes, I have a
Yeah.
link, I have a link to those folks. So they hold a special place in my heart.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for that explanation. We'll steamroll into that second poem then.
Okay, so this next poem, and as I mentioned before, I wasn't born here, so English is my second language. And so this poem speaks to that. English is not my language. My primordial language abandons my tongue. In my brain, words I knew for 8 years disappear. I ache, craving syllables and sounds no longer familiar. An empty vocabulary hisses at the back of my throat. The snake in my mouth struggles, learning a new dance. It tries to uncoil. It trips on teeth until they teach it to say teeth in speech therapy. I read out loud. The students laugh. English is not my language. I search for my voice within a prickly thicket. The thistles discourage me. My words bleed red on English papers. Passive verbs run on sentences. Low verbal standardized test scores whisper, English is your second language. Rejection from creative writing classes murmur, give up. English is not my language. I learned to switch from Carolina to Caroline as if an English sounding name can. It doesn't. I learned to switch from mama to mom, watching The Simpsons, choking on a Homer choke fart American culture. I learned to use the semicolon. I learned to activate my verbs. English is not my language. What was mine is gone. Only a caged snake remains rattling. Fangs poised, poisoning English bars. The snake, it bites, breaking free, snarling. English does not language me. Thank you.
Yeah. Reading this a second time, I see something, or at least I feel like pointing out something I didn't notice before so much. I found it very interesting that in some places you chose to widen the spacing between words. And that's for effect out loud, right? When you say it out loud, it's more of a pause.
Yeah, it's more of a pause. And again, it's just me kind of playing around with punctuation. Like there's no commas in this poem. And so instead of using commas, I kind of, to replicate that space, I actually used white space. So that was sort of my, why I did that in this poem.
Yeah, the most profound one is the one in the next to last stanza where the caged snake remains rattling.
Yes.
Big pause. That's awesome. And then even in that penultimate stanza there, the last line, breaking free, snarling. Wow.
Yeah, I think that, there's poems want to, like, when the form of the poem wants to sort of replicate what the poem's content is. And so for me, it's like that sort of ending was like, yeah, there's sort of like an undoing of all of these things where I was told as a kid, like, oh, like, you can't write, or like, your English isn't that great. And so this is me trying to like sort of being like, well, I'm going to be free of all of that. Like, I can, like my voice doesn't have to be like perfect, or like, whatever perfect means in like the English.
Judgment call, yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I'll say, the thing I love about that is it's concrete. The power of the pausing gives added power to what is being said, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think like silence and like white space or something that like, that it's they actually mean they mean a lot, especially in poetry, and that's another reason why I love poetry.
These are good tricks for writers to learn. There are so many possibilities, definitely more than being hemmed into a standard paragraph. You can really get artistic with this.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anything I should point out. Well, I mean, in the second stanza, right, the speech therapy thing, you have the teeth and therapy. right? So that illustrates it. So that's justification for the spelling. And there was those lines that had the twisting. Yeah, I remember now. It's in the second stanza. An empty vocabulary hisses at the back of my throat. The snake in my mouth struggles learning a new dance. And that's just so visual and physical and makes Marvin Lewis Dorsey snap his fingers. So you know it's good. Yeah. All right. Now we got to steamroll along to the third and final poem. Hi, Carl.
And so this final poem, so this last poem that I just read is also in my chapbook. This current one is not. So this is one of my more recent poems. And I've been, I've been trying to write, not necessarily just about like my life, my story, but also just about nature and like do some more like uplifting poems. So this one is Dear Dawn. Dear Dawn, you are the seed of a new day. You are the nectar hanging on my lips, whispering a prayer in a language my tongue remembers the way it remembers how escaping the womb tastes. Dawn, you are pollinated with possibility, birthing blushing petals splayed across a tender sky. You watch yourself disappear, knowing you'll return. You die in the mornings, tossing your bouquet into my hemisphere. Tomorrow, you will germinate again, a renewal. In my garden, my dead marigold buried its seeds. From its grave, new life sprung forth. I too toss the seeds of my beginnings and endings, hoping that even on days I wilt, I have the capacity to birth myself anew. Thank you.
That is uplifting. Very lovely poem, very lyrical. And again, reading it a second time, I see something that I didn't see before. It's remarkable how you can look at a poem and look at it again and keep seeing new things. This time, I'm looking at your end words, particularly the last word of the first stanza, how escaping the womb tastes, dawn. That's enjambment, of course, because the sentence continues in the next stanza, but at that point, it's almost answering the question, how escaping the womb tastes, dawn. But the secondary meaning, or maybe the primary meaning, I should say, you are pollinated with possibility. Dawn, you are pollinated with possibility. So you're using enjambment to, what most poets do, use enjambment for, is to create a first meaning and a second meaning, or just to make the reader see more. And you have in the second stanza, there's another example of that, splayed across the tender sky, you watch yourself disappear, right? So you get one meaning and an additional meaning. It's very lovely.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I like that I learned about poetry early on is that you want to sort of create a poem within each line. So it's like each line is kind of like a mini poem.
Yeah, it has its own weight.
And I
Very
think that's like I think it's like a really great something to keep in mind. And I think and it just like you can play around where you put the words, and you can find like then you find like those double meanings, and it just makes your poetry richer for you and then for the reader too.
I couldn't put it better. Very good. All right, so we're about 3 minutes ahead of schedule, so I guess I could ask you a question or two. I've gotten the habit of asking these at the end after both poets. I don't know, maybe that's better. I'm starting to fall in love with asking at the end to both poets, because I don't know, the dynamic is so good. And it's more comparative for the students. They can go, oh, she said, oh, but he said, right? And even the poets tend to bounce off each other. So maybe I'm talking myself out of it. All right, I'm gonna go to Marvin. I'll go to Marvin, and if we have extra time at the end, probably not a bad thing. More time to discuss. All right, so are you ready, Marvin?
Yes.
You want to say something introductory while I hunt for your poetry?
I can try. I was sitting here thinking about it, And I'm not a real conscious poet. I never sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a poem about this or about that. Most of the time, I sit down to these days with technology, blank screen on the computer, and start typing, and at the end of the whatever amount of time, there's a poem. I'm not consciously thinking of what I'm doing. And that's probably why I'm having such a hard time accepting the fact that I'm a poet. But we're working. Quiet wooden patio chair. A purplish pink layer of smog visible to the naked eye. Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Mercury, a crescent moon, a lined up early morning Antelope Valley sky. I was sitting in a quiet wooden patio chair wrapped in a blanket, feeling cozy, dragging in a cigarette, craving a large cup of black coffee. My mind offered me a moment of silence. I refused the thought, got caught up in flashing negatives, undeveloped pictures of sick Black people coughing to death. A Black man in a gutter, hands behind his back, handcuffed, crying, calling for his mother as something other than a human being waiting for his last breath tells him to relax. And a dark, cold, beat down, broken old heart sways a knot. At the end of a long rope, a little kid biting teeth, nails, losing hope. Curse you, Red Baron. Curse you, said the dog. Curse you, dying world. Curse you, said the old man. Curse you, said the fool. Curse you, said the rich. Curse you, said the one not wearing a mask. How would you know if I had gone crazy? Eyes can't see a trillion light years away. Eyes can't see right down the block. Eyes can't see patience in a madman. Eyes can't see the end.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Marvin, you're a poet. I mean, you may not like to hear that, but this evidence we have in front of us is real evidence of that. I've known you for a long time. I've seen you evolve as a poet, and this is definitely your stairway to heaven. Because it's got the 3 levels, just like the song Stairway to Heaven has 3 levels. You got your first stanzas, setting the scene, right? In the chair, looking up. And then there's a space there, and it turns toward your own thoughts. And they're pretty heavy thoughts. Yeah, things you've experienced. Things in the news, for that matter. And just when I think you've said it all, you come up with that 3rd section, the worm to your Starship Trooper. I'm such an old guy. I'm making allusions here nobody knows. But it's the 3rd part, and it's almost a poem in itself. But it really is another level of this poem, the curse use, which lead into the I can'ts.
Yeah,
Fun. Huh?
I remember writing this poem. I remember the night, the morning, back there somewhere in 2020, those planets actually are lined up in the sky where we were able to see them. And being that I'm in the high desert with this panoramic view, I went outside before the sun came up and sat there and wonder at, this thing in the sky. And then I went back down off of this container that I was standing on, and I came back in to all this other crap that was going on around me. So I didn't really, it was so easy to write.
Your mind drew the contrast.
It was just easy to write. Like I said, I do have a problem accepting the fact that I am a poet because of how the creative process, does whatever it does. But anyway,
Yeah, well, like any other poet, you just do, and then you work with what you've done.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, I just like lounging in this poem. It's such a wonderful poem to lounge in. That third section, I just enjoy it so much. It makes me think of, I listen to too much music, obviously, because it makes me think of John Lennon. He had a solo album, and there's a song on there. I think it's called God. And in the last section of the song, he just lists, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that. He gets the whole list done. And at the end, he says, I only believe in him and his wife. Everything else is illusion, right?
Well,
But
well, for me, anything out of this space we're in right now doesn't exist. Right here in this room is my universe.
I've heard that. That's why these Zoom boxes are only so big. Oh, yeah.
Until I leave this moment.
We better move on to the next poem.
Yeah.
All right, let's focus on the poetry here. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
That is the poetry. A comforting vibration. A couple, husband, wife. She scrubs the sidewalk like it's a kitchen floor, spick and span. He builds bikes like a cyclist in a backyard garage. Oil, grease, tattooed hands, pair of black jeans. Bittersweet viewing the block as I sit behind the steering wheel, can feel every crack under my tires. High above, pink clouds fall in love with blue sky. As sparrows sing without me seeing them. A comforting vibration that puts a buzz in my bones. So alone looks a girl who walks by my car twice. It's too cold for short sleeves. Santa Ana winds are now just a breeze. They make leaves look as if they're crawling. There's a minute here and there that seems to be dancing in my head, but I can't move or choose an action to take. So I'll just wait for my dogs to start barking. Then I'll move away from all these falling stars.
This is your lyrical poem, right? We saw Caro's, and this is yours, definitely. All those rich images and those rich thoughts all twisted together. That's a poet.
Yeah, I think
yes,
a lot of times it depends on how you read your poetry to get your point across. So I think it's, for me, it's like putting a poem out, and then when you read it, I get to know it again. I think it's different inside than when it comes out, yet the same energy applies to them both. You know what I mean?
It's like you're taking the time to notice things that other people would pass over.
Maybe.
Like there's second stanza is a great example of that. As I sit behind the steering wheel, can feel every crack under my tires. That's a suitable intensity. Oh yeah. And the third stanza is the interpretive one. As sparrows sing without me, seeing them, a comforting vibration that puts a buzz in my bones. Oh yeah. And I can't resist saying the next line too. So alone looks the girl who walks by my car twice. More observation.
I know you're surrounded.
And we're waiting for your dogs to start barking, but they're very quiet right now.
No, they're happy. I've done a good job.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. You are the dog whisperer, and you're also the cosmic fellow, right?
I don't know.
Move away from all these falling stars. Okay, lovely ending. It's I remember hearing somebody say, start with something small and then go big in a poem. That's what that poem does. But this poem, wow, this is a whole nother thing. Want to talk about it?
You know, like I was saying, I didn't sit down to write this like this. I didn't, and I might be wrong for saying it. I think we're supposed to know what we do as artists to might validate it. But I was sitting outside the kennel, smoking a cigarette, and descanting.
If I can say something before you read the poem, I think this poem is more your voice. I mean, this is more your voice. This is, what am I saying? You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
No, explain.
Well, it's all your voice, but this one, it's Dorsian. Okay, we'll just read it and we'll talk about it later.
All right. I saw him. He was standing in broken pieces of shadow made by the wind chimes, across from that empty bird feeder no longer used by the sparrows. The falcon threw them off summers ago. Couldn't clearly hear what he was saying as I stood just watching like that falcon would do, a 20/20 vision staring, but heard something about caravans, encampments, the smell of human waste, trash, and overdrawn bank accounts. I made a city move, tripped over a crack in the dilapidated sidewalk. Now, instead of talking to himself, he spoke to me. He said, I've been watching you, Mr. Black Man, watching how you sit, how you stand, how you walk, talk, and how you peek from behind those brown eyes of yours as if nobody's watching. I've seen you throwing dead rats into the dumpster every morning. I've heard you asking your dog to be quiet, to relax, be nice. I was surprised, shocked, being that after smoking 1,000 cigarettes on this block over the years, I had never once seen this guy. But like a professional poker player, my face didn't show him a thing. I was thinking he was older than me, but he could have been younger. The streets have a way of hiding a person's age like that. And he said, what makes you think I'm from the streets? And what keeps you from stepping away? If stench isn't what makes you afraid, then what does? And I said, what makes you think I'm afraid of anything? And he said, every man is afraid of things he doesn't know, hasn't seen, the one he thought wasn't watching. And I said, how do you know my eyes didn't see you watching? And he said, because if you knew I had been watching, you wouldn't have been staring at me. And I said, staring? I wasn't staring at you. And he said, only a fool can see broken pieces of shadow made by wind chimes and not see the man standing within them. And I said, I'm no fool. And he said, that's not for you to say. That's for the world to decide. And there I stood staring as he went back into the broken piece of shadow made by wind chimes.
Wow. Oh my. It's always good to read a poem a second time. You see, invariably you always see something more than when you read it the first time.
Read it better too.
My observation about this being your voice is just this just seems to be a very naturally written poem. It's just your voice is doing what it does. It's describing, and in this case, it's having a conversation. And it's right there in the beginning of the poem. I saw him. He was standing in broken pieces of shadow made by the wet chimes. And all that description goes on, and then you get into the conversation.
Wow.
Conversation is a nice way to put it, right? Bit of an argument here. And then the revelation at the end. He said, only a fool can see broken pieces of shadow made by wind chimes and not see the man standing within them. That was a wonderful revelation. That was very inventive. How did you do that? How did you do that, man? I don't know. It came to me.
It did,
Phew.
and this was an unconscious poem. This was an unconscious conversation that was made up in my head. I'm crazy. No, but I think what it does for anyone, a younger poet coming up, you got to realize that there is no limitation what you can do with poetry. You can just open it up, like my co-poet said to earlier. There, it's endless of what you can create when you put your mind, pen, and paper together. It's I love it.
Yeah. Uh, if you can get comfortable with that thought, that is very much poetry. All right. I think I said all I can say about these poems. I'm going to close up and do the Q&A. The Q&A. So this question is for both of you. There's the standard student question, the standard teacher question, and I think I even have a third question based on your answer to the second question. Okay, enough algebraic theory. The first question students love to ask, they always want to know, how did you become a poet? Who would like to answer that?
I'll go first. I'll go first. I became a poet out of necessity. I and I think all of us have a creative side to us. I was lucky that I found um, my thing, which is poetry. But I think we all have something that we carry with us that we can use to get us through certain things or whatever. I write poetry because if I don't, my head is going to explode. I got into poetry out of necessity. I have too much inside of me that needs to come out, and I believe that's true for everyone.
So you've been gifted by the muses. Congratulations, sir. And now for another opinion. Carl, how did you?
I mean, I feel like, yeah, poetry just kind of found me from like a really young age. I think actually, like, I was reading Alice in Wonderland, and then there's that snippet, the Jabberwocky poem that's in there. And I don't know, I just like, and I think because just that, like, the wonderful play of language in it, that's like, it's not even like, it's not real words, but like you get what it's saying, which is like, I don't know, kind of blew my mind. And so I don't know, from since then, I just like, I just wanted to write and recreate that sort of, joy that I found in reading. I wanted to recreate it for others, and and then I didn't write poetry for like a really long time, but when I came back to it like 3 or 4 years ago, it just like, as Marvin was saying, there's just so much. There's so much, it's just limitless. It's like limitless. And I think that's just kind of what I love about poetry, because you can create so many different images. Like the whole thing is like, you can just put things that you would never, ever thought of, like putting together in like one sentence, and you put it together, and it's just like, ooh, it's just, it's so expansive. And and so I just, like, I feel like I've always loved poetry since I was a kid. And like, as soon as I got back into it, I just couldn't, I don't know, there's no other writing form that's really called out to me, just because like, like writing essays in paragraph form, it just seems so like, I know, confining now that I found poetry. So yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like everyone knows that the brain has two hemispheres, the left and the right. And the right hemisphere seems to be more poetic, and the left hemisphere is more essaic. Yeah, there's too much left brain thinking in schools, and there should be more right brain thinking in schools, definitely, because the fun is the creativity. That's the fun of writing. Two great examples of that, Carl and Marvin Lewis. Time for the teacher question. What advice would you give a young writer? Who wishes to answer that one? Advice for a young writer.
If I had any advice for a young writer, I would say, don't be afraid to say what's in your heart. And don't let anyone criticize you and say that what you are putting in your paper is wrong or being done the wrong way. If you're expressing something that's inside of you, there's not a human being on that planet that can tell you that you're doing it wrong. Follow your heart and put on paper whatever you want to put on paper.
Yeah, if you can form thoughts, you can be a poet.
Mhm.
That's all of us. We just need to take the time. Hey, Carl, what do you have to say about advice?
Yeah, I mean,
for the writer?
I totally want to echo what Marvin Lewis said. Absolutely. Like, I think that like we need to like own our voices, like regardless of what, you know, what like maybe like standards, like English standards or whatever. You should just, you know, like whatever your thoughts are and your voice are, that's beautiful. And but my other advice would be just like to not give up. Like if writing and poetry calls to you, I think that there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people that may discourage you along the way just because, you know, there's not a lot of money in poetry, or like, you know, there's like a plethora of like reasons, you know, just because of the way that our world is structured, that art is not always the most viable option. But I think that if it's something that calls to you, like you're not gonna be able to find joy in life unless you really, you know, you do dedicate yourself to it. And so yeah, just, you know, regardless of anyone tells you, like don't give up, and you never know where poetry will take you. And I think yeah, you just gotta, you know, keep writing. If you love writing, just keep writing, and don't let anybody stop you or tell you otherwise.
And,
And I
and,
want
like,
to,
and,
what?
like, and like you said, own your voice. That was a great statement. Own your voice. Thank you for reminding me of that. You're up, Don.
I was just doing the math, how many minutes we have left. But I was going to add to that. Carl made me think, you know, the thing that gives us joy in this life is finding the artistry in life, no matter what we're doing, even if it's not writing. Whatever you're doing, if you can find the artistry in it, you're going to enjoy it. If it's painting a bench or whatever, you find the artistry in it, you're a happy human. Yeah. So poetry's made a lot of people happy. And we have a couple of minutes here. So I was alluding earlier that I might ask a third question. And I think it'll be appropriate because I'm interested in this one. Forget the students, forget the teachers. This is my question. I am insanely curious. Carl already alluded to one thing she's read before. I'm just curious, what poets do you read? And I ask you, which poets have you read? Ones you would single out. Any poets come to mind?
There's just so many. Like I feel
Yeah.
like
Do you have favorites? Maybe if you had to do a top three.
yeah, you know, I think that June Jordan is kind of how I first got into poetry. Honestly, I don't know, I really resonated with a lot of her poetry. Like Poem About My Rights is a really good one. You know, and then there's other more like current poems, current poets like Fatma Askar I really love, or Marwa Halal is another really good one. And then there's also just like the local poets in LA, like Janice
Name
Miller
one.
comes to mind. Okay, Janice Miller would be one of my
Denise
top
Miller.
LA
Yeah.
poets. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now I know Marvin, he knows a lot of people in the poetry scene. You got any favorites?
You know, in the poetry scene or people that I'm reading? What's the question?
I'll take both answers. That's kind of what I did with Carl. So
You know what? Right now I'm reading a lot of Bukowski, and I'm reading some of the poetry that's in the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I think there's a certain they were just like Bukowski. He was just in your face, real. He didn't hide behind any kind of facade or anything, and this and this and this. And I like that about him because I know what he's trying to say. He's not hiding behind the frosting and the cake. It's real. You know what I mean? I like that, and I like this other character because he was such a free spirit. And you know, he did some poetry, and then he also was like a journalist, you know, and you can see so much. But I like the poet that isn't putting any frosting on the cake.
are there any poets on the scene that would fit that bill?
You know what? Scott, Kenneth Scott, you know, whatever he reads, it's in your face. He's not, if it's erotica stuff or if it's political stuff, is right in your face. You can't deny what he's trying to say.
And what I love about Ken Scott is he has so many interests
Yeah,
that show in his poetry.
Yeah.
He's a true Renaissance man.
he has a
He,
great. I think he has a great well that he draws from to write. I would think.
Yeah, he did one of these workshops here, and he revealed to us that he grew up in a musical family. So at a very early age, he was singing. I never knew this about
Wow.
Ken Scott.
Wow.
Ken Scott is a singer? Wow. So that was a real revelation too.
That's
All right. We're down to the past few seconds here. I just want to remind the students to do the worksheet for these poets, and maybe you want to emulate one of them. That would be a lot of fun too. Very creative. I'm going to sign off now.